the subscribers or Cranwell edition of The 7 Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence. I'm Adam Douglas from Peter Harrington, Senior Specialist in Rare Books, and I'd like to show you this special copy. Now, I often think The 7 Pillars of Wisdom is one of the most extraordinary books in that half of it is genius and half of it was rather amateurish. So, for example, the printer chosen for it was a man who'd never printed a book before, who was a student, an American student at the London College of Printing. But somehow T.E. Lawrence managed to get together 211 copies in total of 7 Pillars of Wisdom, a triumph. 1926 it was published, and it is a really lavish book, which is all the more remarkable that it was Manning Pike as a printer's first attempt. And as was his habit, T.E. Lawrence himself, who was going by the name of T.E. Shaw at the time, so he signed them as T.E.S., decided which copies were complete and which weren't, and he kept back the incomplete copies to give away, but subscribers who'd actually paid for the book got complete copies, and so this is one of the complete copies he's designated. A little further up the page on the right, you can see that he's also corrected one of the misattributions. The gadfly is not by Roberts, it's by Kennington, so he's crossed out Roberts and put K in. That's typical for the book and for the complete copies. He also decided to use 6 different binders, which was another complicated procedure. This is one of the 6 styles. This was done by Sandgorski and Sutcliffe, the London binders, and they sign it here in gilt at the foot of the turn-in. They don't have very much room to do so, just below Wadsworth's decorative end papers there. You can see the gilt fillet. So there was one of 6 different binders used, and they're very handsomely bound, very solidly bound, with these great bands across the back, and suitably so because it's a very large, heavy book with many illustrations. There are decorations in the text with illuminated initials, and then famously at the back of the book, I can just show you these. There are maps of the campaign of Lawrence of Arabia, as he became known to the general public, and there are also some photogravure reproductions here, as well as portraits of all the main players in Lawrence's narrative of his part in the Arab Revolt. There's the famous portrait of Lawrence himself. Now, this copy is a little out of the ordinary in the subscribers' copies, because we know the subscriber. Here is her bookplate, Nancy Campbell. Her name has actually been struck out on the bookplate, been crossed through, and above the bookplate, you'll see why. Is because this lady here, with a very elaborate name, in 1941, has bought the book at Nancy Campbell's sale. Now that's actually Barbara Hutton is her best known name. She's the little famous Woolworths heiress. She was the richest woman in the world, at one time married to Cary Grant, an extraordinary woman who married several times to men with names like that, which I can hardly make out. But the copy comes with a lot of material relating to the original subscriber, Nancy Campbell. And I can show you some of the things that Nancy Campbell kept with it. Remarkably, she was Mrs. Colin Campbell, was her married name, and she lived in California. And this is the letter written to her by T.E. Lawrence himself when she subscribed to the book. And it's rather typical of him that he seems to be reluctant to let her subscribe to the book. He says here in the second paragraph of the the letter. He says, the book cost 30 guineas, which was a lot of money in those days, is very long and rather dull. So he's trying to put her off. You can see here at the top right hand of the letter, this is the name he was, almost pseudonym he was going under at the time of serving in the RAF. A.C. Shaw, he called himself, and gave his address as Hut 105, RAF Cadet College. So he'd really sort of hidden himself away. But Nancy Campbell didn't let that put her off. She also corresponded with, I mentioned him at the beginning, Manning Pike, who was the young American printer who'd been entrusted with the hand printing of this book. Quite extraordinary. He'd actually worked with another printer who was actually the most experienced private press man in England to produce the book itself. But she was writing to him and getting letters back from him. Here's a letter from Manning Pike. And Manning Pike has sent her this little pamphlet, which is Some Notes on the Writing of the Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Shaw, which is a little pamphlet which Lawrence issued. It's only 2 leaves, and he basically explains the rather torturous history of the book. Famously, here is the little anecdote, is that he wrote book 1 and then lost all but the introduction and drafts of books 9 and 10 at Reading Station while changing trains. This was about Christmas 1919. So it was one of those famous books that he had to start again. And in fact, as he explains, he wrote it 3 times before he was satisfied with it, and then printed it again. Now, this edition, the Cranwell edition, it's usually called, or the subscriber's edition, he calls it the subscriber's edition, isn't technically the first edition, because the edition that he had printed at the Oxford Times counts as the first edition, but only 8 copies of that were ever printed, and a number of those have been lost. So this is really the first obtainable edition of the book, as he explains it here. And so that's Manning Pike has sent that to her. She's also corresponded with various friends of Lawrence's in the Arab Bureau, and people she seems to have known personally. This is Piers Joyce, who was living in Galway, who was an important player in the Arab Revolt. So really this kind of material adds value and context to the subscriber, the original subscriber, and comes with a, this is the auction where this copy was first sold and where Barbara Hutton bought it at the sale in Sunset Boulevard, Los Angeles. So a remarkable copy of what is always a remarkable book in any case, a really handsome copy, and I think much enhanced by this associated material. For more information about this book in particular and other books, please visit the Peter Harrington website.